I think the Great Resignation is a perfect example of the disproportionate impact that underrepresented professionals are experiencing in the workplace. So, 47 million people quit their jobs last year. 47 million.
Wow.
Women are 11% more likely to quit than men. Throughout 2021, women were slightly more likely to quit their jobs than their male counterparts. Overall, 20% of women quit their jobs, while only 18% of men did. Going even further than that, Hispanic and Asian people resigned more than any other race last year. 18% of Black Americans quit their jobs. And when Black women were surveyed about whether or not you'd like to go back to a structured, returning to work in an office model, only 3% said that they wanted to return to the way things were of commuting back into the office.
We created this podcast with the idea that we were going to create a platform that would help entrepreneurs who maybe come from non-traditional backgrounds, help them get more exposure to their brand, their business, their mission. And so it's been a great ride. Well, hello everyone in Las Vegas at the .conf 22 conference. We want to thank you guys for joining us in the DEI booth, the platform. We're excited to be here. My name is Rodell Razors, my business partner Jeremiah Captain. This is the Underestimated Podcast. Again, thank you all. We want to send a special thanks to our sponsors for making this show possible, our partners Splunk, and we are very excited about the show we have today. Like I said, my name is Rodell Razor. I'm one of the co-founders of X Factor Capital, and my business partner and I started this business about 2 years ago, and we've been able to partner with Splunk for the last year. And one of the things that Splunk does to acknowledge everyone's individuality and the diversity of their team is they talk about their million data points. And so before we get rolling, I want to share some of my million data points that make me unique and celebrate who I am. And one of my unique data points is that I was born in Alaska. Another one is that I am a first generation college graduate, and I am a father of 3 boys, and I am an avid sports fan, and I do not miss a game of my son's sports. So I'll throw it over to you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, love sharing our million data points because that's what makes us unique and makes us who we are. Some about me, Oakland, California, so go Warriors right now. I'm an avid reader and I try to read at least 1 book a month. I'm a father of 2 girls, and they would tell you I'm a terrible dad joke teller, but I think I'm the best in the world. And one thing that excites me more than anything else is backing bold, brilliant Black builders, and we have a dynamic one here in a second. We're going to introduce her next.
Yes, so today on the Underestimated Podcast, who we get to share the time with today, someone incredibly special to us, Janice Omadeke. She's the CEO and founder of the Mentor Method. And Janice is only the 94th Black woman to raise $1 million of venture capital. She's been featured in Black Enterprise, Fast Company. She has an incredible TED Talk about workplace inequity and inclusion. And so, Janice, thank you for joining us on the show today. We greatly appreciate it. So we would love for you to introduce yourself and share some of your million data points.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Janice Omadeke. I'm CEO and founder of the Mentor Method. I love the million data points concept. I have not seen that yet. I think it's great. So mine, we referenced CEO and founder of a company I absolutely love and I'm proud to have created with my team. I am a middle child from a Congolese family, first generation American. Enneagram 2, for those of you that are familiar with that, which means very much a caregiver, very much intent on improving the lives of other people around me. So I think that's a good stopping point for now.
That's great. Well, we appreciate that. And Janice, tell us a little bit about the Mentor Method.
I'd love to. So the Mentor Method is a software that helps mid-market and enterprises invest in the biggest driver of their profits, which is their people. We are a system that helps them build scalable, inclusive mentorship programs in under an hour using our algorithm that matches based on personality, values, skills, and industry. But on top of that, we've operationalized the entire system. So you have the matching that's inclusive and impactful, but then you're also walking your employees through training and guidance on how to be an inclusive leader, how to be an impactful mentor or mentee. What does it even mean to be a mentor or mentee? And of course, the part that truly matters for large corporations and their bottom line, data and reporting to show that the matches are successful, the programs are successful, and that there's a connection to your company's retention and inclusion strategies. We're working with some of the largest companies in the world. We raised a round of 1.6, as we mentioned last spring, and it's just been an incredible journey to see people's lives changed through creating these systems and connections for one of the most important relationships someone can have, which is mentorship.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. As you talked about data, we're working with Splunk, one of the greatest data companies to ever exist. There's a saying that says, "In God we trust, but everyone else being data," and you do it so well. So I want to kind of kick off and talk about, you said the who you are, the what you do, and why do you do it. And why did we bring you even on this talk is because when I think of you, I think of someone that always exudes value. And when I think of value, I think of the V is for vision, the A is for being authentic, the L is for leader, the U is being uncompromising towards your vision, and then the E, as you just said earlier, the empathetic leader that you are. So it's so beautiful to have you here with us. But when we spoke with Splunk back in February, we talked about something called the black ceiling, and we talked about the things that sometimes when you're trying to climb up in these higher ups of these corporations, there could be these hills that we're climbing. So can you speak to some of the statistics? They're quite staggering in some of the lack of diversity in corporate America, and what are some of the common challenges that you see underrepresented groups facing on the inside of the corporate world?
Absolutely. I think the Great Resignation is a perfect example of the disproportionate impact that underrepresented professionals are experiencing in the workplace. So 47 million people quit their jobs last year. 47 million.
Wow.
Women are 11% more likely to quit than men. Throughout 2021, women were slightly more likely to quit their jobs than their male counterparts. Overall, 20% of women quit their jobs, while only 18% of men did. Going even further than that, Hispanic and Asian people resigned more than any other race last year. 18% of Black Americans quit their jobs. And when Black women were surveyed about whether or not you'd like to go back to a structured, returning to work in an office model, only 3% said that they wanted to return to the way things were of commuting back into the office. And I think that really highlights a lot of the issues that you asked me to reference in your question. So the most common challenges we're seeing right now, the biggest one and the most underlying issue is a lack of connectivity and a company's lack of understanding their employees beyond their employee ID and their role in the company. Like, it's great to know that employee 567 is the VP of operations, but do you know that they have 3 kids? Do you know that they're taking care of an elderly parent on top of building out your entire operation strategy? Those details are really what show your investment in your people. 87% of millennials and Gen Z highly value growth and development opportunities. So not having those chances to connect with people and also learn are the biggest drivers. Outside of that, the pay gap still exists. We still need to fix that. Racism and oppressive systems are still ever present. 81% of women of color said that they experienced at least some racism in the last year at work, while 90% said the same for sexism.
Wow.
Wow, staggering. As we said there's some staggering stats out there for sure, and we appreciate you bringing that data, talking about the 47 million people that have walked away, women 11% more than men to walk away from the job as well. And it really boils down to, it sounds like you said, this lack of structured mentorship, because that's really what Mentor Method is doing, but they're also really helping design and redefine people's culture. And you're helping create a better culture with this culture of mentorship. And I actually brought a stat here as well, talking about the disengagement of employees costs U.S. companies $550 billion per year. That's from the Engagement Institution. So what are you seeing? What have employers and employees do to, be more proactive versus being reactive in these things? What could someone do to kind of reverse this?
Yeah, I love that question and I love talking to companies about this because I think they're overcomplicating it. Understand your employees.
Yeah.
Be entrepreneurial about your pursuit and retaining your employees.
That's
If there was
good.
a company that was hemorrhaging hundreds of thousands of customers, they would have their best and brightest. They would not care if it was an intern on their first day. If that intern had the best idea in the room, they would use it to retain their customers. Yet they're not doing that inside corporate structures to keep their employees. And as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, you know, your people are the biggest drivers of your profit. So you should be investing in them through listening to their needs, forgetting about the event boxes, forgetting about, the Zoom wine nights. Those are great, but really showing an investment through mentorship, sponsorship, having an open forum for feedback for both the employers and the employees. 37% of Americans cite that pay was too low as a major reason for leaving, but no opportunities for advancement. 63% of people left their jobs last year because of that. So, including mentorship and ways for people to connect with one another so that they can evolve in their careers and see that true alignment to the company's future is paramount. Outside of that, of course, flex work schedules, audits of your company culture. The last piece I would mention is including retention and mentorship as a core part of your financial model and bottom line. When an employee leaves a company, it can cost between 50 to 400% of that employee's salary to replace them. That's a lot of money that companies are losing when they're losing talent as quickly as they are.
Those numbers, it's interesting. You talked about the executives being entrepreneurial about problem solving. Sometimes in the bureaucracy of large companies, things can move a bit slower. They can feel, but like you said, if they were losing hundreds of thousands of customers to a competitor, they would move pretty fast. And so, they would fix it in a day. That's exactly what they would do.
Hands on deck, right?
Yeah. And so, the great resignation that you talked about, that led to a spike in entrepreneurships, especially in underrepresented groups. Our story was similar with your story, where we were, climbing our corporate ladder. We saw problems in trying to climb it and whatever that was. And so we said, you know what, we're going to take our own destiny into our own hands. But that comes up with its own set of challenges, right? Like there's ceilings in entrepreneurship as well. So talk to us a little bit about how the Great Resignation led to more entrepreneurship and some of the challenges, even in your own story as an entrepreneur, and the hills and the ceilings that are there as well.
Yeah, I think especially as Black professionals, we're constantly in spaces where we have to serve as the primary problem solver because we are asked to meet the same expectations with 1/10, if that, of the same level of resources, education, connectivity to a broader network as our non-diverse, overrepresented counterparts. So that's naturally a part of us to say, okay, how do we solve this to maintain our own growth and the growth of our communities around us? So with the example of the mentor method, I was working at a large management consulting company. And prior to that, I was in defense contracting. So the most old boys club one could ever think of, really. And anytime I signed up for corporate mentorship, I was just matched to the only woman or minority executive that also signed up for the program. And that was the basis for fostering that connection. Not who I was, not that they saw some value in me that they saw in this executive and they wanted to make sure that they were tapping into that to get the most out of my potential. None of that. Just matching based on external features and factors. And I found that offensive. And so when I was asked to build a program at this management consulting company for over 150 people, all fully virtual long before the pandemic, I wanted to make sure that one, I was giving myself time back. I was already working 70 hours a week. I did not have more. But I wanted a system that would be inclusive. I wanted to make sure that anything I had my hands in was solving the problem of removing the number of check boxes that underrepresented professionals are identified as and seen more as people. And that's really the backbone of the mentor method and the reason for the results that we've seen.
Wow. So you, I love that underrepresented groups. Sometimes we're just seen as a checkbox, whether you're a veteran or how you identify sexually, or the color of your skin, and we just meet certain checkboxes, and then we have these checkboxes that we meet, and then when you get into an organization, sometimes they just try to pair you with a person who meets a checkbox. Maybe it's not even the same checkboxes. It's just like, oh, well, we're just gonna, and then that may not promote your career trajectory. It may not really support your ambitions or your vision of what you want to create in your career at all. But it just matches a few check boxes. So, and I think that Jeremiah and I, we see this a lot with entrepreneurs, where we see a problem within an organization, and rather than going, you know what, I'm going to deal with this problem internally and I'm going to try to work my way up to where my voice is heard, we go, you know what, I'm going to branch off and go solve my own problem that means something to me, right? Like the mentor method and what you've done, what we've done with X Factor. In X Factor, the problem we solve is we want to deploy more capital into Black entrepreneurship, because right now it's less than 2% of venture capital that goes into Black entrepreneurship and Black startups. You are a Black woman, so your stats are even more staggering. Can you tell us a little bit about your fundraising journey and how, you meet a checkbox in a few of them, but you're also a solo founder. And there's unique challenges that come with that. Can you share a little bit about your fundraising journey and what venture capital, that environment has been like?
Yeah, I bootstrapped. I think the first thing to call out, quite honestly, is the privilege that I had for being a top performer for several years, where I was able, and I worked for some of the largest companies in the world as well. The management consulting firm I worked for paid very well. So I was able to bootstrap a long way of building the mentor method. And I know that not everybody has that privilege. So I just like to call that out ahead of time when I mention that. Yeah, of course, it's important to do, but.
And can you describe bootstrapping really quick?
Sure. So bootstrapping means that you leverage your savings, your 401k, in my case, selling your lovely townhome in Alexandria, Virginia, to continue building your business, so that you don't take on outside capital. That can also look like taking out a business loan if it's applicable to you, or getting non-dilutive funding, but really owning as much of the company as humanly possible, and either reinvesting the revenue that you're generating, or leveraging either a nest egg or another source of capital that doesn't come from a VC source. So
Perfect.
that was the first stage of it. Outside of that, Arlen Hamilton was our first investor. We were part of her portfolio 100, and that check meant so much, and it helped put us on the map. In terms of the fundraising process, honestly, I navigated the same way I navigated corporate America. I have my goals, I have my plans, I have 37 other backup plans that I'm ready to implement. I have an amazing support system of mentors and sponsors, advocates, and friends that'll let me vent about it. And I also invest a lot in my mental health. So I think having all of those tools in my toolbox, it doesn't make it any easier. Trust me, it's still brutal. It's still really hard, but it helps ensure that when I'm in investor meetings and they make a comment that might be intentionally biased, might not, I know the right questions to ask to sift through that. I think another piece of it, there are a few parts, but another piece of it is surrounding myself with a team that understands the nuances of having a Black woman CEO. It's just different,
Yeah.
Having our VP of sales, having our VP of product in our investor meetings, and sometimes they hear the bias and the difference of questions, where they're like, If you were a straight white male, you would not be getting that question. And I'm like, yes, I know I've been Black my entire life. I understand that
Not
this
naive
exists.
to this, right?
Yeah, like this isn't the first time I've heard that question or have been asked something demeaning that belittles my certification in entrepreneurship from MIT and my strategic management graduate certification from Harvard. But here we are. And I think that ties into my next point, which is that the business, the mentor method really speaks for itself. You know, we're working with some of the largest companies in the world. So you don't have to like the fact that I am a woman. You don't have to like the fact that I am Black. You don't even have to like the fact that diversity and inclusion is important. If you actually care about generating returns for your fund and for your investors, this is a great place to be. And having that mindset has really helped us as we continue on in our fundraising journey. I do have to say, easier said than done. I've been at this for years now, right? And this is something that I just got really centered and aligned in. I would say maybe the last 7 months or so, a little under a year is when I really started settling into this headspace of we're doing the right things. The investors that want to stay modern and relevant will see that. And the ones that don't will end up, having a harder time raising in an economic downturn or otherwise because they're not capturing the most innovative companies like the mentor method.
I think that's so important. And you talked about mental health, and we've got a chance to see you put it into practice. You're not just talking the talk, you're actually walking the walk. You had a mental health day for your staff. We were trying to get, I think it was last Friday or was it the Friday before?
This past Friday, once a month, we have a mental health day.
That's incredible. That's so cool because, and it's real, right? Sometimes it's mental health day, but everyone's checking their email and everyone no one actually got back to us, which we can appreciate that it was an actual real mental health day. So yeah, you're definitely walking the walk. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that it's really important. I'll throw it over to Jeremiah for the next question, but I think it's really important for people out there watching that, there's challenges both in the corporate structure and in entrepreneurship. And you said your mindset, you always have a plan, you always have a way to attack, you always have a backup plan and then a backup plan to the backup plan, not using it as an excuse, but taking the adversity as an advantage and seeing how you're developing yourself. And then the people that you're bringing along with you, they're up for the challenge as well. And they see it as an opportunity, a great story to tell. And so we definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, you definitely have something we call the startup stomach, because these startup streets aren't for everyone, but you definitely have the resolve and the commitment. But it goes back to the word I said earlier. You create value. You are value. You have the vision. You are authentic in sharing your story. Once again, you are the leader driving, and you're uncompromising towards that goal. But you're smart enough to know that, hey, sometimes we do have to pivot, because all about starting a business, you have to be willing to iterate, and you probably have been getting some feedback loops and seeing what's working and what's not. And that's what it takes to build, a company that's going to be, big as the world one day. And the last E we talked about with being having empathy, but really empowering your team as well. The next question I want to lead into, so we talked about the who you are, the what you do, the why you do it. You shared so many stacks. So how does the mentor method work? You don't have to obviously give us the entire recipe, but break it down to someone to understand, okay, what makes you different than anything else out in the marketplace, and how does it all work?
Before I do that, I just want to say thank you so much for that last 45 seconds of affirmations. Whenever this is available to download and listen to, I'm just going to crop it to that little piece of time and just play
great
it
best friend and
before.
business partner to have.
Yeah, I'm playing that first thing every morning in perpetuity. Thank you for that.
Sometimes in the morning I call him and just kind of whisper sweet things into his ear to get him empowered, and then, but it's all brotherly love.
Listen, the rising tide lifts all boats. I get it.
So
but
the
to
how.
answer your question,
Yes.
Yeah, how does the mentor method work? Would love to tell you. So let's use one of our customers. They have 3,000 seats on our software. And so with that, they can create as many programs as they'd like. So they can have a 500-person Women in Tech program the same time that they have a 50-person engineering team using the software, or a 1,000 person new hire onboarding experience. The magic behind the mentor method is that not only can you have all of these programs running at once, but you now have a corporate-wide, streamlined methodology that everyone is using. Because oftentimes you'll have a company where Jane Doe in Albuquerque is building a program using some methodology she found online because she's using, she's manually building this entire talent retention mentorship initiative. And then you have somebody in San Francisco using another methodology that they found online. Both are matching using a spreadsheet and LinkedIn profiles, which is it's just not effective and it's not helpful, right? So with our tool, we start out by helping you operationalize that entire process. Once you've done that and you customize the program based on how long you want it to be, what are the qualities for your mentor and mentee, what's the goal and everything else, you're off to the races. Your mentees and mentors are notified that they've been invited to participate in a program. They take our short proprietary personality assessment, which pulls indicators for values and personality, which is really important. When you think about some of the most meaningful relationships you have in your life, you're not like, I love Rodell because he was an accountant. Nobody says that, right? But instead you say we have a lot in common, or, we value family, we value flexibility and innovation, whatever it is. And so that same logic applies here with the way that we match people. Outside of that, you then have guidance, training, and resources in the software to know what to do every step of that mentorship program. So whether it's 4 months, whether it's 12, really doesn't matter. You're empowered to know everything you're supposed to do so that you can just relax, be present with your match, pick the best match for you because you can see most to least compatible matches in the tool, and then use those guides. So we've covered setting it up. We've covered the matching piece. We've covered that you can see your compatible matches and use our guides. The last piece is the data and reporting, and this is really important. So mentees and mentors are able to assess their interactions with each other to make sure that there is accountability, that the mentor is, not canceling meetings 2 minutes before, and that the mentee is sending agendas in advance, and all of those smaller details that can erode a relationship. We've helped mitigate those completely. But in addition to that, you're able to see the success of the program overall and whether or not employees see a true alignment to a company's future and supporting their talent retention strategies. So we have built all of that into one magical place called the mentor method, and we're seeing great results. 86% of those invited to participate in a program do. We're able to reduce churn by 5%. Depending on the size of the company, you're able to save over $100 million in retention savings just through using a software, and specifically using the mentor method to help you streamline, match, and go through that entire process. So it's pretty cool.
The magic in the method. I definitely love that because I'm an advocate of mentorship. I'm a product of mentorship. I think every person that's become successful, can speak to that. But how many companies don't have a true game plan? Like you said, they're not entrepreneurial about developing their talent. Some companies do it very well. A lot of companies don't, right? Especially when you're talking about from diverse thoughts, because diversity is more than just race, gender, and particular core beliefs, right? It's also how you think, it's how you communicate, it's like you said, personalities. There's so much that gets wrapped up into that. So having something that's so thought-provoking to bring the right mentor relationship together is so valuable. Saving that $100 million in retention, that's a no-brainer, right there. That would make me want to sign up if I was someone in HR. And I don't know if you stated this stat, but I heard on one of your podcasts, companies that have structured mentorship outperform other companies by 34%. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. And now, we're in a great space for companies to start adopting more mentorship models, because 70% of enterprise companies that are implementing mentorship programs are doing it for the very first time right now because of the great resignation. And so you have non-technical, HR and talent retention leaders responsible for retaining tens to hundreds of thousands of employees They know that mentorship is important. They know that matching using a spreadsheet or, half-baked initiatives don't work. But it's also something that when you have that many competing priorities, as these professionals do, and competing responsibilities, it can be easy to default back to the status quo, as we call it, which is that manual matching process. So the fact that we've taken the guesswork out of it to empower these companies has helped them, keep their talent significantly longer than otherwise. I believe the stat is that you can see a 40 to 50% increase in retention of those in a formal mentorship structure.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. 70% of companies, first time callers to mentorship. Wow. You would think, they would have that tapped in. But once again, they're so busy, building their company, doing what they're doing. They don't have time to build something like this. That's the power of startups. Someone can come in like yourself, see the problem and develop a dynamic team around them and go execute and go solve that problem. So moving on to another question, if I'm an HR manager right now, if I'm executive, what is the right thing for me to do right now to help my organization, not have so much, loss in retention? Obviously, of course, let's get them on with the mentor method, but also some other things they can do until they're ready to kind of walk through and learn more about the mentor method. What are some of the best practices? Because that's something else you guys offer in that, right? Your thought leadership, than just giving them a product and say, hey, that's it, but also really helping them, really, learn the best practices in the market.
I would say get as much advocacy from the cost verticals as humanly possible. Get the CFO on board with what you're doing. Get the head of operations on board. If you have access to the CEO, make sure that they understand how this impacts the entire trajectory of the company. A good example of this, and a piece of advice that I used to use actually in my corporate days, I used to have a slide eons ago with 3 different people. Just follow me with this story. I promise it's going somewhere.
I love it.
So I had a picture of this young woman named Angela, who was, I think, 17 when she innovated on cancer research, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I had George Washington Carver, the inventor of peanut butter, multi-billion-dollar industry now. Then I have Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, who created a multi-billion-dollar business on her own as a solo founder. Now imagine if these 3 people worked in corporations where they were just the young Asian professional, the only Black man invited to a meeting, and the one woman on the board. You're missing out on so much innovation, so much potential, and quite honestly, your next billion-dollar idea, if you're not taking the responsibility of talent retention and distributing that responsibility across finance, operations, the CEO, and not just relegating it to a corner of the business, which is HR. And I think when they're able to illustrate that story cohesively and tie in the monetary benefits, depending on the culture, depending on, the leadership structures in place, what we've seen is that they're then able to say, okay, perfect. And they're allocated more budgets. They're given more advocacy. You'll see the VP of finance sign up to be an executive sponsor for a mentorship program, or really look into ways that they could develop their talent. As I mentioned before, the need for flexibility was a big piece. Pay gap was another big issue, and also finding ways to stimulate the development of your employees as much as humanly possible. So whether that's mentorship, whether that's providing, a subscription to HBR, or creating, book clubs, or whatever it could be, making sure that your employees feel psychologically and emotionally invested in, and that they know that you want them to be the best versions of themselves in whatever form or shape that takes, is the biggest piece of advice I could give. In fact, I had other bullet points. I just went off script, and I'm not even going to read them because
No, you're on point. Yeah, we don't mind going off script because we want it to be real. Once again, going back to value, you're authentic. We're not robots here. We're real people, and that's what we want to help leaders understand. The people working for you guys are actual humans, and they need to be connected. And if you don't have that relationship, for me to grow you, I must know you. That's something we've been hearing here lately in some of the connections that we have. So it's like an engine without having oil. That's the lack of relationship, and eventually the organization dries up. and you're helping people really curate that so they can have a dynamic culture. I'd love to pass it off to Rydell if he has anything else to share towards that.
I would definitely want to, share, expand on a little bit of what we were talking about with entrepreneurship, working, the workplace inclusion, and those they have their independent struggles for underrepresented groups, for all groups. They have their own challenges. And I think one thing that's super important that we want to make sure that we really touch on is that it's so cool, because you talked about this during our prep session, how, don't jump off the cliff. You don't have to do that. You can build something on the side that's a passion project, and you can, do side hustles, or, if entrepreneurship is something that, is an itch you want to scratch, you can do it within, kind of an intrapreneur, still work a full-time job. And many of us are first generation college graduates, first generations that are, working in senior level management positions. So we're taking care of family members. Like, we're not in a position where we can just jump off and say, hey, I'm going to go build the next $1 billion startup. And so, with what we've done, with X Factor, something that we've just spent a lot of time on is really helping entrepreneurs go through that process of, is this something I want to do with the rest of my life? And can I do it alongside with what I'm currently doing? Because entrepreneurship, and there's so many tools out there now. Tell us a little bit about, did you go through any accelerators, any boot camps, things like that, that really helped you kind of mature as an entrepreneur while you were still working?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the first thing when people are still in a corporate role and considering building a business, I tell them to keep that job for as long as humanly possible. Because mentally, when you have that stability and you know that there's a way for you to, support your family, support yourself, you don't have as many limiting beliefs as when, you're really out in the arena counting every single dollar because you have to make it stretch. So I say bootstrap for as long as humanly possible. But yes, to your point, I did leverage a lot of accelerator programs. I do want to commend the amazing work that X Factor is doing, because you provide access to those resources. You're very open with giving feedback and advice. And that's a foundation that not every accelerator program provides. I just want to say kudos to you all for that first.
Thank you.
But yeah, I
We didn't
used
pay her to say that, you guys.
I was not paid to say that. It is true, and just something that I feel deeply about. But I used a lot of accelerator programs. The great thing about it, to your point, about needing to have these meaningful connections before you start to see that advocacy most of the time, is that you have a safe space to build those relationships. Yeah. So we participated in the Mass Challenge Accelerator, one of the top 20 programs in the country. That's actually how I moved from DC to Austin for that program. Was only supposed to be here for 4 months, but to be in Austin is to fall in love with it. And here we are 4 years later, never leaving. And then most recently, we did Techstars Austin, run by Amos Schwartzfarb, and just phenomenal program. I think they're one of the best ones to support Black founders, actually, out of the entire Techstars portfolio. So really enjoyed that process. The mentors that we had an opportunity to engage with are still people that I'm calling and texting and getting advice from consistently, even though the program ended back in March. And I think there's a lot of value. I think from an accelerator perspective, and especially at those early stages, you need spaces to both make a mess and be a mess. And you need community around you that understands what you're going through and has either surpassed that because they've exited, or they have, incredible businesses, or they're in the trenches with you, like your cohort, where you're saying, oh my God, I am struggling with this thing, or how do I respond to this situation? And they're like, oh, I had that happen to me last week. Here's how I did it. Or sometimes people forget that when you're an early stage startup, you don't always have a lot of money, right? And so they're really helpful. Your peers and your cohort can be really helpful in navigating how to stretch your capital as much as possible, and innovative ways to think about reaching your customers, or, acquiring team members. There's a lot of innovation that happens when you're all in the arena together.
Yeah, and I think that's the same as can be also said for the corporate work environment. Some people have the ambition to eventually become part of the C-suite, and they're coming in at entry level or mid-level management, and they have the ambition, they want to grow in that. And that's why employee resource groups are so useful, because it's a place where you can make a mess and be a mess, right? Where you can go and you can be yourself, because there's other people that look like you or have similar ambitions as you. They want to help grow the company that they're in. They want to contribute to the bottom line. They want to contribute to the health of the organization, and they don't have the entrepreneurial itch, but they still want that representation, and that community is still so important. So I appreciate you sharing that. So I didn't warn you about this part, but I'm going to do a little bit of rapid fire and throw some questions at you and give you, 1 to 3 words responses so that you can we can get to know you a little bit. Is that cool?
Wait, how many words? Sure. How many words do I have to use?
The short responses. Let's just say that.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
Cool. What is your favorite book and why?
Ooh, The Vanishing Half.
Vanishing Half.
Okay, I don't think I've heard of that one yet.
Yeah, well, add it to my collab.
It's not work related or anything like that. I read it early last year, and it's something that still sticks with me, and I remember lines of it. It's just a really, really powerful book.
Okay, so if you had to choose one, would you choose inspiration or execution?
Execution.
Execution is worship, yes.
I love it. I love it. And who's the hero of yours?
Oh gosh. Okay, I'll be semi-short because there are a few people that really do inspire me. So I would first say my family, right? My parents are a big driver for why the mentor method exists. This is my way of paying homage to the sacrifices they made by immigrating to America. I saw them mentor so many relatives and people in our community to understand how to pursue the American dream. And I didn't realize how much I internalized of that until I built a business helping connect people to building out the American dream and having real careers instead of jobs, right? So first heroes. Gwen Houston, former head of DEI for all of Microsoft. She was just supposed to be an advisor, but she's just a dear friend, and I can't imagine navigating life without her at this point. Same thing for Kimberly Strong. She's the former head of DEI and HR for Target Corporation for 20 years. She was our very first advisor.
Wow.
So imagine, speaking of mess, right? Imagine how many things that she was helping us navigate with. I will always hold her dear in my heart. Joseph Kopser, who is the Mentor Method's head of operations, military veteran. He sold his rideshare app to Mercedes in 2014. And whether I want it or not, he's really good at giving me critical advice. And I honestly, when people ask me about him, I always tell them that I attribute a lot of my growth as a business owner to him. Because he remains personable, he remains warm. He's not, full of it, despite the fact that he very well could, as a straight white man with a lot of success. So I think those are the people that immediately come to mind. I am sorry for those of you that I did not mention. We are under a time.
This isn't the Grammys. We're all good.
Like you won an Oscar, who did I forget about? No, thank you.
No, that's wonderful. One of the questions, this one Jeremiah submitted, it's really good. If you weren't solving the problem with the mentor method, what problem would you be solving?
Ooh. I know the answer, but I'm probably going to create a business around it at some point, so I can't tell you.
That's all good. You don't have to share. That's valid. We like that. Keep that close to heart. I think the last question we'll share. We'll get ready to wrap this up. We'll give everyone their time back. We were stretched for 45. We're coming up right under it. Where do you see Mentor Method in 10 years?
Oh, we're going to be the leading cultural change management place for mid-markets and enterprise. There's a lot of room to play here because we have the work days, we have success factors that are really focused on, the onboarding and sort of the backbone operations. But what people aren't thinking about is what got us here won't get us to the next 100 years of innovation. How are you thinking about tapping into the power of millennials and post-millennials, as that's the next leading class in these companies. We're in a unique place where we have 5 generations working in the same companies for the very first time. That's going to require a lot of inclusive leadership, a lot of training, and technology to help these companies understand how best to retain that talent. And that's only the tip of the iceberg for the mentor method. Since this is recorded, I can't give our competitors too much, but we really do see ourselves as the leading place for cultural change management, and we're well on our way to accomplishing that.
Yeah, she just let all the competitors know, no mercy.
No mercy.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, because you talked about like the mentoring and developing of the next generation of leaders. Like every great society does a great job of preparing the next generation for leadership. And that's really what you guys are doing in Mentor Method. So it's really, really important to do that. There's an old saying of like, hey, what if we train up our staff and they leave? Well, what if they stay? Right? The detriment of what that will cost them staying around. So we really appreciate you having here. We want to thank once again our sponsor, Splunk, for having us come in and to share our hearts and having us be able to hear this dynamic story from this amazing human being. And a big shout out to Antoinette, that's actually there, making sure we all got set up. We really appreciate her. Bobby, Travis, we could not do this without you, so we really acknowledge you.
The entire Beams team.
The entire Beams team is all the Beams teams make the dreams work. You want to add anything else?
No, I want to send a special shout out to, again, Splunk, and all of you that are watching at .conf22. Thank you all. This has been an amazing experience. So,
Janice, where could everyone find you? Just
social media handles.
Yes, so you can find me primarily on LinkedIn, Janice Omadeke. You can also email me Janice, Janice, at thementormethod.com, and visit us at www.thementormethod.com.
Well, thank you guys. This has been great. Season 2 of Underestimated Podcast has been kicked off with an amazing episode from the CEO and founder of the Mentor Method. Thank you, Janice. Thank you all.